of time and space. Everywhere and anywhere, every star that ever was. Where do you want to start?
The Doctor, Vicky and Stephen are off to new adventures, but we're taking an unprecedented sidestep onto the planet Kembel, which the Doctor lampshaded so shamelessly last time out. What on earth is happening here, and why are a bunch of English media students so interested in it all? I'm Iain.
And I'm Mark, and welcome to All of Time and Space. And yes, it's going to be something a bit different this time round. So this is where we are in the story. Stranded in the jungles of Kembel, the most hostile planet in the galaxy, space security agent Mark Corey has stumbled across the most deadly plot ever hatched. The Daleks are about to invade and destroy the universe. Corey has to get a warning back to Earth before it's too late, but the Daleks find him first. And we'll be back with our very special guest after this.
I didn't intend to tell you anything, but since we're stuck on this planet and Garvey's dead, there are some facts that you're entitled to know.
Yeah. Jeff Garvey's dead. And we flew together for the last 10 years. And now he's dead, and you killed him. You better explain that fact and make it good.
Sit down and take a look at this.
I don't know. Space Security Service, license to kill.
That's right.
They'll count me out.
This other document gives me the authority to enlist the aid of any person, civil or military. You were just enlisted. From now on, Lowry, you can take your orders from me.
Yeah, all right. But I don't fully understand. Better fill in a few details.
All right. I suppose you've heard of the Daleks.
The Daleks invaded Earth 1,000 years ago.
That's right. Well, they haven't been active in our galaxy for some time now, but that doesn't mean they've exactly been sitting around. In the last 500 years, they've gained control of over 70 planets in 9th Galactic System, and of 40 more in the constellation of Miros.
Can't see why that should concern us. I mean, they're both millions of light years away from our galaxy.
That's what we all thought. But about a week ago, we had a report from the captain of a space freighter. His navigator spotted a spaceship of a type never before used in our system. He saw it only for a second, but he gave us a good description.
So?
What he described was a Dalek spaceship.
And welcome back. And I'm really pleased to say we've been joined by the lovely Deb Green today. Hello, Deb.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing good, thank you. I'm on holiday from work, so...
Oh, you lucky thing.
Yep, I've managed to move from one end to the sofa to the other end, so completely different perspective on the world.
Yeah, I'm going to say, it sounds like you're living the dream. Thank you so much for coming on and joining us for this episode.
Thank you for asking me.
I've been looking to get some different voices on, and I thought, yeah, she sounds like a smart cookie, we'll get her on.
I can deceive.
But before we get into the subject in hand, I think we're going to subject you to Iain.
Yes, Deb, it's time for the Mind Probe.
Oh, not the Mind Probe.
Getting to know
Who?
Getting to know all about
Who?
Oh, wonderful delivery.
That was
Excellent.
perfection. Now, sadly, to recap, the point of the quiz was we would hurl people that failed the quiz into the time lash. Mark has broken the time lash, so we can't do a quiz anymore. Before I come to the Mind Probe, Mark, is there any update on your repair job to the time lash?
Yeah, the tinsel is still looking pretty ropey.
And you weren't able to source any more tinsel?
No, it's industrial grade, you see. You can't just have any old... You can't just grab some stuff out of the Christmas box.
Oh, no, I was going to say you could, nip up to the loft and just grab some, but if it's a special tinsel we need, we'll have to, I suppose, source that through some kind of industrial outlet. But can you get it done for next episode?
Yeah, I've been looking online, and there's a company called Glitz and Son, and I think they
sound
might be able to
reputable.
supply some.
Yeah,
very reasonable prices.
Have you tried Costco?
Oh no, maybe I'll give them a go.
Anyway,
thanks for the tip.
Yeah.
Right. So, Deb, welcome to the Mind Probe. What it has now become is really just a little quick informal chat, just to get to know you and introduce you to the listeners. So, my first question to you: would you say you're a Doctor Who fan, and if so, how long has that been the case?
I am a Doctor Who fan, but I won't have the knowledge. I was listening to some of your back podcast, and I did have a word with Andrea and Lindsay, and I said, you're talking about episode 25. I don't know what episode 25 is. And then,
we don't half the time, to be fair.
Yes. So I have my Google next to me, just so I can keep up. I think I started watching properly around about Tom Baker time.
Oh,
nice.
And then I didn't watch, which I now know is season 25. I didn't get on with Sylvester McCoy. Much as a nice man he is, I just kind of felt it got a bit silly.
Yeah, you're not alone there, Deb.
Yeah. And
Ian's gone off to sulk now.
I wasn't that keen on the John Pertwee, but just because it got to sort of James Bondy, and it was more about the cars.
Deb, you are talking my language. I'm going to give you a virtual high five here. Yeah, he's not my favourite Doctor, so it's not necessarily an era I'm looking forward to when we get to it. But
it may be full of surprises.
It may be. I'm gonna come to it with a fresh outlook and a fresh pair of eyes. And
I'm just gonna get drunk. Anyway, Deb, what are your other passions in life besides Doctor Who?
And Jason Isaacs. I am a follower of Andrea. I was I am a huge Blake 7 fan. So when I saw Terry Nation on this episode, I was very excited. And because Terry Nation created Blake 7, and just a tremendous creator of sci-fi. Although Robert Holmes is my favourite writer, I think, because I like the wit and the slightly dangerous element sometimes of the Robert Holmes. But yeah, I'm a member of the Team Basement gang that Andrea created. So we annoy Jason Isaacs. You also work for children's services and try to be sensible, or pretend to be sensible, in my everyday life.
So that's like your outlet when you're away from work, and you can just let your hair down.
Yeah. Although I don't. Yeah. Yeah. It's good fun, and we've got a really good group of friends. We do a lot of charity fundraising, as well as looking after each other and being very silly. For some reason, we're into owls at the moment. It's a long story.
Okay.
So we had a basement owl day yesterday.
Nice. I'm sure Andrea did some illustrations, because she is a bit good at the old.
She hasn't yet. We need to
get her onto that.
Well, so we've possibly already answered this, but my next question to you is: what is your all-time favourite era of Doctor Who?
Actually, I'm not sure I've got one, because there's aspects I like about each one, really. I love Tom Baker because that was the Doctor that got me into it, and he's just a legend.
He is.
And I also like Peter Davison, because all of a sudden, of someone my age at that time, I went, a young Doctor, and that was quite interesting at the time, and also so into cricket and
right.
it just piqued my interest again. I've got to start watching Doctor Who again to see this new young Doctor, and it seemed like a radical change. But then I really liked the reboot as well.
Well, good.
It's difficult, it's difficult to pick one. I guess it would be Tom Baker and David Tennant.
Ah, fair enough. 4 and 10. And finally, if you could go back in time, perhaps in a TARDIS of your very own, and you could change one thing in Doctor Who history, what would you change?
Oh, the episode with Paul Darrow in when he did his Richard III impression. I'd like him to ham it up a bit more.
Right.
Yeah, he was very understated in that one, wasn't he?
It was a very subtle,
I thought so.
very nuanced performance. Yeah, I think he could have, kind of cut a bit loose with that and had a bit of fun with it. But yeah. Well, great stuff. Thank you for sharing your fandom with us. And now we're going to the Dalek Cutaway.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Mission to the Unknown. This is quite a momentous story for several reasons. It's the last one to be produced by Verity Lambert.
Yeah.
A legendary producer. Which is, it's quite sad to see her go, because she was such an inspirational figure in the creation of the programme, and she did so much to really push it in the early days, because I don't think there was an awful lot of enthusiasm from some of the bigwigs in the higher tiers of the BBC, but she really believed in it, and she really gave it her best shot to really get it up and running. I think she did a fantastic job.
Absolutely. And when you think that women are underrated in the entertainment business now, and to have had a woman in that role at that time that made such a significant difference and must have been listened to eventually to have got this. Sending the Doctor off on holiday. I like that.
Yeah. Yes, and this is another first because, as you mentioned, there's no Doctor. It's a Doctor Light episode. Yeah, you thought that started in the new series. No, so it's not just Doctor Light, it's a regular cast Light story.
I'd go further than Light. I mean, Light implies they're in it for 3 minutes at the end, but this is a Doctor No.
Yes.
This is a companion No story.
It's quite a bold move, isn't
It's
it,
a
really,
very
when you
bold
think
move,
about it?
Yeah.
I think that the boldness about it, because I was listening to your episodes and realised you know everything, and I don't.
Oh, I wouldn't go that far.
So I've done a lot of reading. There were previous episodes where the Doctor didn't appear, and they just said, "Oh, he's not well, or he's off doing something."
That's right.
But they were part of a sort of a long period of episodes.
Yeah.
He still appeared in the story, but this one doesn't even mention the Doctor, and that is still the only one where the Doctor doesn't even get referred to. And the weird thing is if you just turned on the television and to watch Doctor Who, you'd just think, well, what's going on? Because at the end, there's no reference to where it fits into the story, and then it's another, is it 4 or 5 weeks before you actually see the Daleks' master plan and see what's happening next. It must have been weird. I'm just glad there was no social media, because could you imagine everybody on Twitter?
Oh my God, people would have been losing their proverbial, wouldn't they? Jeez.
It would have been like Alex Kurtzman. They would have demanded the sacking of Terry Nation.
Oh God!
About every 3 episodes.
I wonder, because obviously with any sort of part 1 of a new story, we are getting used to perhaps having a bit of an establishing couple of scenes before the Doctor appears. And because of the nature of this episode, and it's fairly propulsive and it doesn't really pause for breath, I imagine there were a lot of people who watched this when it was broadcast and didn't even notice the Doctor wasn't in it, maybe until the end credits, and they were like, oh yeah.
He was in the credits.
Yeah, he was.
Apparently it was in his contract.
Ah.
Yeah.
It's very forward of it.
But the other regulars didn't have that luxury, so they didn't get one.
They probably thought he was in one of those I keep reading it as
Vargas,
Viagra, so I'm sorry. If I mention Viagra plants, you know what I'm meaning.
Wow. You don't want to get pricked by a Viagra plant, do you?
Well, that was the other point. I did think if this was Bob's podcast, I may go on about pricks at this point, but...
Well...
He'd be in his element, wouldn't he, Viagra? And
that said, Garvey did look a bit stiff on the floor there, didn't he?
Yeah.
And he got
did.
shot. But anyway,
They were
let's...
pretty.
Costumes.
Varga. I can't read me writing now.
Yeah.
They were pretty crap as evil monsters, though. Really, the Daleks brought them with them, and the Daleks have got these, sort of exterminating sink plungers. I know that's lazy because they're, but they can exterminate people. They're dangerous, but they bring these plants that move about an inch every half hour. And the only way they're going to kill you is if, like, the idiot Gordon put his hand on one. Really. I mean, in the remake, they were stood there with guns. You just think, walk away.
Yeah. They're not... I mean, by 60s standards, I'd say it's a fairly run-of-the-mill alien. In modern eyes, they look pretty awful. But as a concept, I think it's quite gruesome. The whole idea that you get stung by this thing and it completely, you metamorphose into this weird mashup of a plant and a being. It's really quite creepy when you think of it in those terms.
I was just going to say, it's a very nice idea that the Daleks have these plants on their home world, and this is, I think, the only time we ever see them. So they obviously get to the end of the Daleks' master plan, and they think, right, back to the drawing board, lads. The plants didn't really help. Leave them at home. Yeah. Anyway, Mark, you're a bit of a fan of the Daleks' master plan. As
it has been said.
It has been said by you quite a lot.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm wondering when. Well, that's a bad way of phrasing it. What's your history with this episode? Obviously, the newly reconstituted version by the University of was it Lancashire or Lancaster? I can't remember. Has been live for a couple of years now. But would you have sat through this as a recon years ago, or did you come to it through the audio track?
Yeah, so the first experience of it was the audio, and I was going through a phase of checking out all the missing episodes, and I got quite obsessed with them, which is not unusual among nerdy Doctor Who fans. So that would have been my first experience, and then I finally came to the realisation that the loose cannon reconstructions that I'd heard so much about that had been doing the rounds on videos back in the day were actually now appearing in various forms online. So, I had to check that out, and they do a brilliant job when you consider there's no telesnaps of the story at all. It's incredible what they do actually manage to put together just to get that bit of imagery to go with the soundtrack. So that was my next step, and then obviously we've had this, I think, pretty impressive remake by these students, and it just brings it on to another level. So you've got these various ways, and obviously it got novelised. John Peel did the novelisation, so I think they did, because Master Plan is such a massive story, they had Mission to the Unknown and the first half of Dalek's Master Plan in one novel, and then the concluding part in the next one. So I've experienced it in lots of different ways. It is probably my favourite Hartnell story, without question. So it's it's one I have a lot of affection for.
Right, and Deb, have you watched it? I'm imagining possibly for the first time for this podcast.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Me too.
I watched the is it Ian Levine animation and the remake, and I got a DVD which used some of the continuity pictures, I think, and then some of pictures of the actors from other places and the original audio. But that wasn't much different, really. Didn't tell me anything different than the animation did. I think.
Did you have a favourite out of the different ways of experiencing it?
I liked the remake, but then I liked going back to look at the original monsters and to hear. I think hearing the original audio helped.
Yeah.
A lot. So it was a bit like being a detective, isn't it? You're trying to piece bits together, and it was pretty impressive, really. I thought to look at the original monsters and to read about them as well, and the costumes.
And what about yourself, Ian?
Well, I read the Target books when they came out, which I believe was towards the end of 1989. So I would have been...
it was quite a late one.
I'll say 5. I'm lying, but I'm saying 5. And then obviously today I watched the loose cannon and the... Now, please tell me which university made it. Is it
Lancaster?
Lancaster, thank you.
It is Lancaster, yeah.
I'm so sorry I stumbled over that. They did a fine job. I watched their version.
They really did.
As well. I noticed that they uploaded it to the BBC's YouTube channel exactly 54 years after the episode was originally broadcast. Are we going to wait that long for them to get around to doing the rest of the Daleks Master Plan? Or
I hope not.
Why don't we do it?
That's a good idea.
Well,
we did a remake of Blake 7. Well, it wasn't a remake. We did Blake 7, The Next Generation, on original locations.
Oh, wow.
Well, admittedly, we were driving around a car park in Yorkshire with a football in the middle, yelling out the window with pretend guns from the Liberator pointing at it, going, "That's Aaron."
Now, I was going to joke that sounds like a very, very cheap episode of Blake 7, but actually, no.
Yeah. Yeah, we had a good time. I'd love to be in one of those remakes, but...
Are you a budding thespian, then?
I do a bit, but I'm not very good, but it's good fun.
So, again, you'd be absolutely perfect for...
I could practice my Richard III.
So we've all seen it. We've all experienced it in some form or other. Mark, what was your favourite iteration of the episode?
I'm quite old-fashioned as a Doctor Who fan. I do like the recons. I think it's the nearest you're going to get. Although that said, the U-Clan remake the attention to detail was really, really impressive. So hats off to them. But yeah, I just like the thing with recons, particularly, I mean, this is not the best example of a reconstruction. Loose Cannon do such amazing work. They, in many cases, will do animation to go along with the stills. But yeah, I think it's the closest you can get to experiencing the original broadcast. So luckily, fans back in the 60s recorded, using various methods, the sound of the program onto audio tape. So that's why we still have the audio of all the stories, even though we don't have all of them in the archive to watch. So we have to be super grateful to those guys for recording these episodes. I think the recons are my favourites. I think it's it's a bit of a mindset. It's not for everyone. I can imagine there's a lot of people, my wife included, bless her, who would not sit through a reconstruction. I think it could be really hard work. But if you get into the mindset and you kind of go along with it, it can prove quite an enjoyable way of experiencing the programme.
I think it's interesting that obviously recons are fair, that they're mainly for, freaks like us. But Doctor Who is a very kind of kinetic program where a lot happens and there's a lot of motion and there's a lot of high speed, running up and down corridors or whatever. And I wonder if the recon format might be better suited to a more sedate program where no one really says anything much or moves and it's all just people looking at each other like, I don't know, Inspector Morse or the Vicar of Dibley.
Well, this episode didn't have a huge amount. I mean, there were 2 locations, really. After hearing about Andrew on the last episode, I'm wondering where the Chumblies were. Because this episode could have been a lot shorter if they'd had a few Chumblies with them. Fix the rocket. They'd have been off.
You're so right.
Can you imagine a shootout between the Daleks and the Chumblies? Wow.
Yeah. Everybody needs a Chumbly.
Do you think the Chumblies would have been able to sort of bounce or levitate so they could shoot the Dalek at sort of eye stalk height?
I think that's a good point. They could definitely win a fight against a Viagra plant.
Well, they'd be up against some pretty stiff competition. So
they look quite flammable as well.
They did actually, yeah, quite dangerous. So I'm going to come down very firmly on the remake by Lancaster. I think they did a fantastic job, and I think my main reason for liking their version was the aesthetics of the spacemen in question. I want fit, young, sexy people to be spacemen, not sort of shabby-looking middle-aged people with bad hair. And one thing that these guys got absolutely right was they cast, dynamic, young, exciting, convincing space actors. Whereas prior to that may not have always been the case.
To remind you that I'm a big fan of a middle-aged actor with... Well, he hasn't got bad hair, but he's sort of balding.
Well, he wasn't always middle-aged. I mean, you think back to when he was in The West Wing. We've gone down the Jason Isaacs rabbit hole again. And, he was a very striking boy.
He still is.
I imagine. Well, I mean, each to their own. He's not in my top 5, but...
I still think one of his best turns was in a really not very well known indie film called Skeletons. I think he's great
love
in
Skeletons.
That. It's only a little cameo,
well.
but
and it was filmed near where I live as well.
Oh, was it? Oh.
The Great Central Railway, the steam railway bits and that. It's used a lot in films. Nice. It was used in loads of stuff, but the Laurel and Hardy thing, Stan and...
Oh, yeah.
When they
Stan and Ollie,
dropped the case down the stairs. But all the and the outside scenes all around the East Midlands.
Oh.
You're listening to the Jason Isaacs Cutaway episode of
we so need the Jason Isaacs Cutaway. He was asked to be in Doctor Who, but it didn't work out.
Was he asked to be in Doctor Who?
Yes.
When?
I don't know. He doesn't. He said that the bit was too obvious, the role. So whether he, I think he turned out that he was secretly a baddie, and he said people will see it a mile off. I hope he does.
Was this sort of in the New Who era, or are we talking classic? It was recent.
I think so. Yeah.
Oh, that's fair. I reckon he might have been Professor Yana, or someone.
Yeah.
There's a hint of the Master about him.
Oh, he'd be a brilliant Master.
He would be a brilliant Master.
Sigh.
You never know. It might happen.
So I got another aside that doesn't mention Jason Isaacs.
Okay.
At the weekend, doesn't mention. At the weekends, I go and deliver a paper to someone who's isolating because of COVID. But unfortunately, it's the Daily Mail. Despite that, she's a very nice woman, and she makes me laugh. She's completely bonkers. So we get on fine. I was delivering the paper, and she said, "What are you doing this week?" And I told her about the podcast, and she said, "Oh, that must have been about the time where I went down to visit the set." What?
What?
You visited the Doctor Who set? She goes, yeah. She's design woman. She lectured in design, so she went down to see whether she could take her kids from college to go and look at the design on the set, and she doesn't know the name of the woman she met, and actually it turns out she said, I met the man, it was Tom Baker, so it would have been the 70s, not 60s. And his amazing voice gave her sort of the shivers, and she said it was really weird that you're in the middle of this spacey set and there's an ironing board there, and and they were trying to fix these heads of these things because the lights didn't come on, and also they had to redo this suit for one of the main actors because he was complaining he didn't have a pocket to put his cigarettes in.
It wasn't Davros then, because he had that
what do you
ledge.
remember about it? What who was? What were the monsters like? And she goes, they're the centaurs. Let's go. What, the centaurs? And she goes, Yeah, so I was getting, I don't remember any centaurs. She said, well, you know what centaurs like? They look like centaurs. I said, are you sure? And at this point, she told me to go away, and she wished she hadn't started the conversation because I was slightly weird. But she rang up later, and she said it was the Minotaurs.
Oh, Mark.
So, Minotaurs,
Oh, my giddy aunt.
And she said that some
is-
lights were supposed to come on, and they weren't coming on, so she was trying to fix and iron everything.
That's one of my favourite stories of all time.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get her talking about it. She already thinks I'm a bit weird.
I mean, I am in the minority in thinking it's good, but
So is it the Master in
Horns of
that
Nine.
episode?
no, there's a Graham Crowden is in it. There's a very over-the-top baddie.
Ah, well, maybe it was him that wanted the pocket.
Yes, could well be, yeah. But, it's one of my favourites. Oh,
You're listening to the Horns of Nymon Cutaway.
Well, come on. As you said, it was only 26 minutes. We need to find everybody that's been on a Doctor Who set and record them, really.
We
and get their
do, don't
memories.
we? Yeah, we could do that. I mean, we've got time. We're going to be doing this podcast for many years. So let's look at this episode in perhaps slightly more detail. So there's this sort of spaceship thingy in a jungle, quite a good jungle. I've seen worse jungles.
I thought it looked really good.
They're fixing it with some sort of spanners, which is what you use to fix a
There was
spaceship.
screwdriver.
Screwdriver.
Yeah.
Right.
There was a screwdriver. It came up as on one of the fan sites as what was being used.
Not a sonic one, though.
No.
So very high tech.
Too early for that.
And then we also have the Daleks, who seem to have allied themselves with Belgium's 1965 Eurovision Song Contest entry, Silly Pop Wow Nice.
Yes.
Now, one of these characters, I think it was Malfa, the one with the really
Yes.
arch dialogue, looks like a sort of angry baked bean.
Oh, the delegates, I think they're wonderful. It's just, when I was a kid, my first time I saw them, I think it must have been a photo in one of those reference books. I think it might have been The Key to Time, Peter Haining. And just the first time you see them all lined up, you think, oh, wow. You can imagine what they must be like. Obviously, as a child, your critical faculties aren't perhaps quite the same as watching it as a grown adult. But no, I thought they were amazing.
So I'm assuming that, because obviously I have read the Target book, but that was 32 years ago. And I'm still only 12. So I'm wondering a lot about these delegates, who they all are, what species they represent, and what kind of political dynamics have brought them all, individually to this negotiating table to make up this union. Now, is that a part of the Daleks' master plan, or is that really not important?
It's not integral. Yeah, it's not integral to being able to enjoy the Daleks' master plan. They do crop up again, so they do come back for master plan.
But you don't really, don't get any backstory.
No, they've just obviously decided to ally themselves with the Daleks because they think they stand a chance of taking over the galaxy, little knowing that the Daleks are sneaky so-and-sos and they won't be around for very long once the Daleks get what they want. My favourite one is the one that looks a little bit like a Christmas tree with the weird sort of eyes at the top.
Yeah, it reminds me of Count Binface.
Yes.
Expect to see him stood behind Boris Johnson at an election. He wasn't in
Probably might have done a better
the
job, to
next
be
one,
fair.
was it? I think they must have broken him. And they had different actors in the
Yeah,
the
they
master
do change
plan.
it up a bit. And there's a bit of confusion over what each character's called as well, which I think got resolved a bit when one of the episodes came back in more recent years. But yeah, I think they're fantastic. I just think it's such a 60s look to them. When you look at all the various designs of them, it screams of what someone in the 60s might think an exciting alien might look like.
I love the
on
imagination.
a very BBC budget. Yeah.
And the one with the antenna, you're right. I knew it reminded me of someone. It's Eurovision, isn't it?
Pretty much. I mean,
Wasn't it that Polish woman that was singing about potatoes or something?
You might be right. I think pretty much all of them have design elements that have been used more than once in Doctor Who. There was one who was in a sort of big spacesuit with a big breathing filter, who was kind of like is it the Megarians from Terror of the Vervoids, and like the fish people in The Doctor's Daughter. The guy with the little frondy things hanging off his face wasn't really that far removed from that Stenza gentleman that turned up with Jodie, Tim Shaw.
Gentleman.
So they were all fairly kind of visual alien tropes, but they did look very exciting, all getting together like some kind of precursor to a 70s glam rock band or something, and it's a shame we didn't get that angle, because I'm sure they could have, written some tunes when they weren't negotiating with the Daleks over their big model of the solar system. So as we've touched upon, this was written by Terry Nation. It was also kind of a backdoor pilot, so he could nip off and try and get his own Dalek series up and running. How do you think this episode stands up in the context of that as a pilot for a kind of Doctor Who free Dalek space serial? How do you think it worked?
I'm kind of glad it didn't, because it sounded they were trying to mimic James Bond. They didn't have James Bond budget, and it would have taken away from the Dalek stories that we saw. He may well have sort of controlled how the Daleks were used in Doctor Who a bit more as well. But there would have been all those stories to entwine. The power of the Daleks is kind of the shock element when they turn up, and I like the ideas, but I like the history that we've got with the Daleks, and also, we have had Blake 7 if that had happened. But it was exciting.
There were plans at one point to have the Daleks turn up in Blake 7. They were going to be the big bad at the end of, I forget, I think it may have been season 2 of Blake 7. And then it was decided that wouldn't be a good idea, so they then changed them out for generic aliens. I think that could have been quite interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, would you have watched this if this had gone to a series?
Of course I would. I'm a sado one. I'll watch any old. I do agree with what Deb says. I think it would perhaps diminish some of what we did get with them staying in Doctor Who. But it's interesting to think about the road not taken and how that might have panned out. But I think Terry Nation made enough money as it was, frankly. So I think I'm glad it turned out as it did.
Well, I'm going to disagree with you both then, because I think this this was one of the stronger episodes of, well, certainly season 3, but in terms of being really dynamic and engrossing, probably because it's literally 2 sets and a car park. I thought it was really strong, and it did feel kind of different to Doctor Who, and I don't just mean that in a very crass because the Doctor wasn't in it kind of way. It did feel like it was very subtly trying to demonstrate that there could be more to this universe than just the Doctor turning up in places. And you got a very thumbnail sketch of what the SS, well, they the SSS or something, Space Security.
That's right, yeah.
Cool. You got a little kind of bit of background there that could have been fleshed out during the series. You could have had a kind of Buck Rogers type Flash Gordon kind of hero as the identification point, and I think it could have been a very interesting thing. It probably wouldn't have run for very long, and then the Daleks would have been flown back over to the UK and put back in Doctor Who in time for John Pertwee. So
of course the other thing is that he was hoping for it to go to America. So obviously with the American networks, they had a lot more money to spend. So you would have probably been seeing them in colour, on film, with budgets for more expensive looking sets and things like that. It would have been interesting to see how it would have turned out, but I'm happy with where we are.
Well, I'm thinking now in this parallel universe where the Americans are producing this colour production about the Daleks in the mid-60s, maybe in that universe Star Trek would never have happened.
That's scary, isn't it?
Well, it is if you like Star Trek, yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's just a little interesting, what if kind of thing. There's probably a lot of fan fiction on the internet where someone has written a full season of this kind of show. Probably Terry Nation.
Well, you will be surprised to learn, Ian, that Big Finish have announced a series of box sets.
Shut the front door.
I know. The first one is featuring none other than the Lord Sir David of Tennant.
Yay.
And a character who I think is meant to be Sarah Kingdom's sister. Sarah Kingdom is one of the characters from Dalek's Master Plan. So yeah, that's coming out at some point.
You couldn't make it up, could you?
I know, who'd have believed it?
They love stories.
They do. Talking of stories, I suppose, there isn't that much to really pick apart.
Well,
but
I mean, I don't want to criticise it because I loved it, and I found it, exciting, and I liked being in that era.
Mm-hmm.
But just the Daleks aren't very scary they have 7 people coming from, and only 6 turn up, so already they can't count, so that's not very scary. They bring their house plants to protect them. Or maybe they were just missing home a bit, and then they broadcast their secret plan over a loudspeaker. So
that was a bit of an oversight, wasn't it, really?
Also, there's no catering for that conference. I didn't spot any finger food.
Can you imagine?
None of the delegates were holding a paper plate and trying to sort of stuff a vol au vent away before the minister from Galgafrincham turned up. So it was
Monster Munch.
Oh yes, that would be.
Oh yeah,
that would be.
What's an evil plan without Monster Munch and and peanuts and pineapple on sticks?
Nice.
Cheese and pineapple on sticks. That's what they needed.
So we're not a fan of Dalek.
I wonder if that's what
catering.
the prickly things on the Viagra plants were that you had to pull out, and then you put cheese and pineapple on them. And you had to eat them carefully because otherwise you turned into a cheese and pineapple plant.
You heard it
here
first.
Specialist Japanese fish dish, isn't it? Where if it's not cooked to perfection, and you end up dying from poisoning.
I might have slightly lost it now.
I want to say the puffer fish, but I could be wrong.
No, you're right, pufferfish.
Yeah.
Yes, so the Daleks, as you say, broadcast their top secret plan on, Dalek Radio 1. So the space agent Mark Corey was able to tape that. And I thought it was very interesting, this kind of snapshot of, I think... So they said the Dalek invasion of Earth was about 1,000 years ago, which puts this in the sort of 31st century. And it's encouraging to know that by that point in our development, we will have gone back to really massive analogue audio cassettes.
I love that.
It was beautiful, wasn't it?
And spaceships that look like they've come out of Button Moon.
I love that spaceship. I think it's really cool.
You see, there's Peter Davison again.
It all links. Wow.
I don't think you're quite such a casual fan as you make out, young Deb.
A bit more than casual, but I've got some gaps to fill up.
Oh, well. Maybe if you keep on listening to the show, you'll be inspired to watch some more of the old stuff. And
I definitely will. I downloaded BritBox, so I can watch some of the early ones now.
Excellent.
Oh, it's a godsend, I tell you. But it is the end of your social life as you know it.
What social life?
Well,
yeah, at the moment.
Obviously, yes. Good
I'll pull
point.
the blinds down when lockdown's actually finished. I go, no, I'm sure it hasn't. It hasn't. I've got another episode to watch.
Be like one of those men they find who still thinks they're fighting the Vietnam War because they never got the message it was over. So, yeah, I mean, so have you watched much of this era of the show?
No.
And what did you make of it in terms of, the pacing is different and it's all a little more kind of creaky and ponderous and I think probably a fair degree more simplistic than even the show was in the 70s. Did you get along with it, or did you get impatient with it?
I didn't find this one too slow, but I mean, even when I go back to Blake 7 now, so I'm used to things not exactly being, non-wobbly and glued together, and you use your imagination. It's about the story. It's not about. Although you can laugh at the monsters. I know what Andrea thought of them. But when you actually think that somebody expanded their imagination to come up with that, I kind of think it's quite wonderful. But you can still giggle a bit. But I have no patience for a lot of older episodes of things now. My concentration period is awful. But I didn't find that with this. I think it was because it was new to me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's good. I did wonder how you'd get along with it, so I'm glad that it wasn't a complete waste of your time.
Not at all. I enjoyed watching it.
Excellent.
I will definitely watch some more of that era. And of course, Peter Purvis is a legend from Blue Peter days. And
yes. I remember it being quite a shock when I realised that he'd been in Doctor Who. Because, as you say, I'd only really known him from Blue Peter. I just assumed he was a presenter all the time. But I think, I think he brings a different dynamic. We won't go down the rabbit hole of speaking about his predecessor because Iain tends to go off on one. So
he was
No.
Predecessor. Yeah.
There was a character called Iain.
Yeah, Iain.
Who was... and our Iain isn't the biggest fan. So, putting it mildly.
So we know that this episode was kind of created to give the regular cast an extra week's holiday. We know it was recorded in the same production block as Galaxy 4. And obviously its function is to kind of whet your appetite for the imminent Daleks master plan. But now we go on to the next story, which is the Mythmakers. And I'm wondering why the episodes were shown in that order. Would this not have come better after the Mythmakers as a direct lead-in to Dalek's master plan, or does it work perfectly where it is in the season, reassuring the viewers that, don't worry, 4 weeks from now we'll have lots of Daleks? I mean... I'm not coming down on one side or the other. I just want to hear what you two think of that.
I quite like the idea of it. I think it's you have that sort of sense of foreboding. Obviously, we have the benefit of being able to know how the rest of the season's going to pan out, because your average viewer was sitting down and watching this in the 60s, and it was just an episodic program, so they didn't know what the next episode was going to bring, so it might have carried on that story on Kembel for all they knew. It must have been quite a surprise to then rock back up with the Doctor and the crew in the story that we did get. So I like it. I think it's...
You're kind of relying on people watching every episode, which... there have been 2 channels or 3 channels then. So, like when I was a kid, you sat down and watched television as a family. Whatever was on. So I guess there was a pretty good bet that people would be sticking to it. But I wonder if there was any suggestion at all. And there's also the fact that they all died. You've set up this guy to be a bit of a hero, a bit of a James Bond License to Kill, and then they all die, and you feel like they've lost everything apart from you see the tape recorder. It must have been very weird at the time, wondering, well, what was that about?
Yeah, and that theme continues in the Daleks Master Plan. There are deaths left, right and centre. It is a pretty full-on story. So yeah, I don't know if that's... I mean, obviously these stories would have been commissioned before the new producer came in, the guy called John Wiles. So I don't know how far ahead they would have planned this with Verity Lambert, but yeah, tonally you can feel it's flexing its muscles a bit. We've got a bit more variety in the storytelling. So we had this conversation with Andrea when she was on in the last episode, where the very early parts of the series stuck to the format of, you know, going forwards in time, going back in time, and there was no kind of blurring of the lines, whereas by the time you get into season 2, things are really shifting up a gear, and they seem to be a lot more playful with the storytelling. It's not quite so po-faced. And now we've got into season 3, and it's really, they're expanding what it can be again. So you're about to go into what at the time was the longest story in the whole series until we get to Colin Baker.
I will defend Colin Baker if I ever get there.
Oh,
should we go down the Colin Baker rabbit hole? I'm very interested to hear this hot take.
Have you ever heard anyone defend Colin Baker?
Only Colin Baker.
I've met him. He's a lovely man. He's a very nice man. His era isn't one of my favourites, I have to say.
No, but I don't think he was given a chance, because
no,
when you have Doctor Who for that long, you wanted to try something different. And the idea of a slightly darker Doctor gone wrong that was still developing was an interesting idea. It just didn't work. But I don't think that was Colin Baker's fault.
No,
and you saddled him with that costume as well, and that's just...
The costume didn't help, but I think the problem, and I really don't want to come over all J.R. Southall, but when you've got a script editor who actively dislikes the actor, or if he didn't dislike the actor, he disliked the way in which the actor was cast in the role. So he then spent the next 2 years trying to sort of undermine Colin Baker's Doctor and sideline him.
Yeah.
So he was kind of, you know, fighting for attention and fighting to be part of what was happening on screen. But without turning this into a season 22/23 special, I mean, at the time I thought he was my favourite Doctor when I was -3. But watching it recently on BritBox, I really struggled with that whole era. But let's draw ourselves back to 1960. Are we still in 65?
65.
We are still in
yes,
65. Fantastic.
The year I was born, so
Hooray!
I would have been a few months old, so why wasn't I watching?
Well, maybe you were. You wouldn't know.
Well, yeah, possibly. So what do we make of you had the 3 guys who are the sort of the main principal heroes, for want of a better word. Well, here's the thing. You've got Mark Corey, who's this secret agent type, and the other 2 guys, I feel like they really weren't in on the deal at all. They'd just been lumbered with being seconded into his mission, and they just end up as collateral damage, which is, yeah, a bit of a sad way to go.
You've just been told that this slow-moving plant is lethal, and then you go and put your hand on it. I mean...
Yeah, you do deserve what you get, I suppose.
There is a sense where perhaps you or I, in similar circumstances, being warned about the Viagra plants, would maybe, keep our eyes peeled.
And don't sit next to it and put your hand on it.
Yeah, so what a nice plant. I'll give it a little stroke. Ow, oh no.
It look a bit feathery and cute though.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 other guys, and I'm not even going to pretend I can remember their names, they were there very much as just, red shirts to get killed off. And it was all about Mark Corey, who was obviously a sort of fairly thin transposition of the James Bond character into a space uniform with his license to kill and his gun. And
Ian, did you recognise the guy playing Jeff Garvey?
which one was Jeff Garvey?
He's the guy who starts off the episode saying,
So
I
Must
remember
kill,
now.
must
Kill,
kill,
must
kill."
kill.
I know who it is because I read up on the episode on various websites, not just Wikipedia. Oh no. And it was Barry Jackson, I believe.
Yeah, he crops up. Well, a couple of times he was in an earlier story, but he's probably best known as the intergalactic used car salesman from Gallifrey who crops up at the end of The Key to Time with Tom Baker.
Well, he's best known for being the Doctor in Midsummer Murders, but we shan't hold that against him.
Oh, is he? Oh, right.
And the other chap was, I believe I'm right in saying, was one of the cavemen from Unearthly Child?
Yes. Yeah. So they
They
are
still
starting
reuse
to...
actors a lot. I've got a
Yeah.
friend who's an extra, and he's
yeah.
been in loads of Doctor Who episodes, and and other things as well. He's had a few lines. He was the person who, in the Matt Smith episode, I think it was, when the world was going nearly destroyed because of the wife left the house in a bad mood. He was the husband that put the wife in a bad mood. Yeah, that doesn't help, does it? Oh. And he was also the chef on the Orient Express that got shoved out.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
And he was a police officer at Trafalgar Square underneath the TARDIS.
Yeah.
His pictures are amazing.
Wow.
Ah, wow, I
He's
imagine.
done a few conventions.
Well, you would.
Yeah.
I would.
Yeah.
He's not allowed to put anything out until it's been shown, and then you suddenly find out he's in it.
No.
So
That's
he's had a
still pretty
few
cool, though,
lines,
isn't it?
but most of the time he's just in the background. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Lucky duck.
Yeah, you must be the right sort of person to do that, though, because you must just have to sit around and be bossed about
Oh, yeah,
a
I
bit.
can imagine it's nowhere near as glamorous as we like to imagine it is.
Nice.
I tried to crash a catering truck once. I read about it. If you see a film being made, if you just walk up to the catering truck,
Oh, yeah.
I doubt if you can do it now, but
Try your arm.
there was no
yeah.
ID or anything. You could just walk up and have breakfast, but I chickened out at the last moment.
Yeah, that's because you're an honest person.
Coward. But I did. It was a Great Central Railway, so I went down, pretended I knew where I was going, and there was a guy, French guy, sat there who said hello and had a paper, and he turned out to be Gerard Depardieu.
Okay.
Oh yeah, and another. Yeah, the episode was great. I went to the Doctor Who at the proms to the dress rehearsal because I knew someone that was in the choir, and it was absolutely incredible. But because it was the dress rehearsal, they didn't have very many people in the audience, so you had all these monsters coming up to you and doing their bit, and I was in tears because the lights and the emotion of it, absolutely incredible. And at the end, at the interval, she said, come backstage. So okay. So I went backstage, and there was like a Jadoon with his top off, and they were trying to do something to his uniform. They had Peter Davison and Matt Smith there, and they we were all a bit excited. Somebody came out of the Jadoon's room and told us to be more sensible and mature. So they thought I was with the choir. We should grow up. So I went back, and then at the end, they weren't saying there weren't many people around. I just thought, let's go backstage again and see what happens. And what I didn't realise is that they'd been recalled to practice a new bit again. So there was just me. A few monsters. I stood there holding the door open for them. I can only remember the Jadoon.
As you do.
I think there was the gentleman, wasn't there? Or was that Buffy? I can't remember what they're called.
The Silence
anyway,
were Doctor Who, the Gentlemen were Buffy.
Yeah, the Silence, that was it.
Yeah.
So I was opening the door for them, pretending I should be there. And then I turned round and there was just Peter Davison and Matt Smith stood there. And some kids, and then they disappeared. So I went over and chatted to them. That was so surreal. I can't remember what I was talking about that now. I think it was, taking the opportunities, really, of pretending you should be where you shouldn't be.
Absolutely. It's it's what events are there for. If you can't, gate crash something and have a bit of fun, then
They were so nice, though. Both of them were really nice, and they signed an SFX, which I think I lost in the move.
Oh no!
But he couldn't get his pen to work, Matt Smith, so he had to sign it about 4 times.
Oh.
And he played for Leicester City when he was a footballer.
Yeah, he was all set to be a pro footballer, wasn't he? Yeah.
Academy, yeah. So it was, we were talking about how great Leicester City were, and he was saying how good. Is it Burnley he supports? Or Blackburn? Burnley, I think.
I think Burnley, yeah. Wow.
I was trying to convert him.
That's amazing. I sort of bumped into Peter Davison once, but I was just walking along in Richmond, and he just sort of ran past me and into the station. And that is the whole anecdote, I'm afraid. But I spent about 2 hours just kind of standing there. You know that thing you do where you sort of double take and shake your head, and you think, was that Peter? Was that Peter? But he had a very nice long blue coat. Perhaps if you're listening, Peter Davison, you could confirm if that was in fact you or not. It would be about, 13 years ago now. Did you own a long blue coat? Let us know. Be great to hear from you. And you could talk to us about your favourite story from season 3. Well, if no one's got anything else to pick apart, and we've done very well because we've been going for twice as long as the episode we're talking about, and that's always a good sign, I think.
We have been trying to talk about anything other than the episode, haven't we, really? But,
there have been tangents, sure, but I don't think one should shy away from a tangent when a tangent presents itself to one, especially, frankly, in this era of Doctor Who, where sometimes it is a little bit hard work. But I feel, we've kind of...
Oh, I can tell you something else. If you go online, there's instructions on how to make your own Viagra plant.
Oh.
Out of toilet paper and cotton
You have to
wool.
be very careful about how you search for that on Google, I would imagine. You could get all sorts of images coming up, which you don't necessarily want.
Well, maybe you do. Viagra's not illegal, and there should be no shame around the subject of erectile dysfunction.
Absolutely.
There's no stigma. We've all drunk 5 bottles of claret and then fallen through a window.
Who hasn't? Yeah.
Yeah. And then, obviously...
Should we put a rating on this thing?
Yeah, let's do that,
I can't remember what they're called now. Vargo plants. Yeah. Cotton wool, glue, toilet roll, and straws, although we
Lollipop
don't like
sticks.
plastic, so I was thinking of using cocktail sticks.
Well, I tell you what,
nice,
if lockdown continues and you find yourself bored and you want to make one of these Varga plants and send us a picture, we'd absolutely love to see it. And
I am
sharing that all over our social media.
2 weeks on holiday. I'm going to make one.
Do it, and then we
Excellent.
can start work on our own dramatisation of this episode.
Absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. Mark,
I'm
do you
already
want to...
thinking how I can make Daleks.
Oh, now, toilet roll tube with a cotton wool earbud for the eye stalk and 2 other small sticky things for the arms. I had to improvise a lot when I was young.
I had a plastic Dalek outfit that we used to... A red one.
Outfit?
Oh.
Yeah, it was like a plastic...
Was there some sort of weird fetish wear?
No, we were little.
Oh, right.
And then you
Okay.
stuck your head in there and then you ran around.
If it's the one I'm thinking of, they're super rare these days and they go for a lot of money.
I wish I still had it. It was red, I remember. I think we
Yeah.
used to argue about it. That's probably why it disappeared.
Oh, yeah. Parents probably thought,
They could have
Gotta
bought
get
us
rid.
2.
well, they're probably quite expensive at the time.
Yeah, maybe. But even more expensive now.
Yes. Oh my goodness, yeah. If you've got one, they go for an absolute mint. Anyway, shall we put a score on this episode?
Yes.
Right. I shall go first this time, just to change things up a bit. I normally get everyone else to do it first. I am going to give this one a fairly solid 7.5 out of 10. I think it's very compact. You know, you've got the 25 minutes duration. Now, obviously, with hindsight, we know it's going to lead into something else. But for what it is, I think it's an exciting story. I think it moves along at quite a nice pace. The Daleks do Dalek-y stuff. I like the interaction between the three main guys. I thought that worked really well. I love the delegates. I think they're just tremendous fun. And yeah, I really, really look forward to Dalek's Master Plan, because that's where it really starts to take off. But this is a nice little prelude to get you in the mood for it. So yeah, I'm going to give it 7.5. Deb, what are you going to give it?
I'm going to give it 8 because it was saying the first early episode, William Hartnell episode, or without William Hartnell era that I'd seen. I thought it was fun.
Oh, cool.
And I'm looking forward to making my Viagra plant.
And Ian, what are you going to give it?
Oh, it's a 10. It's a 10 from me. I thought it was one of the
you
most.
are throwing those 10s out left, right, and centre.
Am I? I don't remember. But it was really well constructed. It was really solid. I think it worked very well as that backdoor pilot. I think it indicated a brilliant science fiction show we never got. It, as you say, worked brilliantly as a sort of prelude to the Dalek's Master Plan. And obviously, my score is coloured by that Lancaster reconstruction, remake, because they did such an amazing job. It doesn't feel like a missing episode to me. They brought so much life to it and so much reverence and so much love, and I don't think they would have done that if there wasn't something of real merit to get that passionate about. So
no, fair play to them. They did a fantastic job of putting it together, and the attention to detail was incredible. Really, very impressive.
And as what you said, the love that had gone into it and respect as well, and using the trying to make it as original as possible.
Oh yeah, it's really super authentic, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Marvellous. Right, so that's what we think. Let's hear what you guys have to say about Mission to the Unknown.
I've got mail.
So let's hear what you guys have to say, and we're going to start off, as is becoming the tradition, with some audio feedback from our friend Ben Schneider down in Indiana.
Whenever I watched the recon of this great story, I always thought it was kind of hilarious how the loose cannon people pictured Corey and Lowry fixing their futuristic space rocket with a normal everyday 1960s pipe wrench, a regular old plumber's wrench. They actually hold on the pipe wrench image for several seconds just to drive that point home. So were they mocking the limited resources of the BBC prop department? But actually, Loose Cannon is very good at researching what actual props were actually used. So they probably did use a regular old pipe wrench on this futuristic ship. So I wonder, was it actually a hidden message? You see a pipe wrench, you think plumber. What else do plumbers use to fix toilets? Plungers. And what do plungers mean? Da-da-da! They showed us the pipe wrench to foreshadow Daleks! Brilliant!
Thank you, Ben. And I have got a few bits of feedback here. We have heard from Andy Moore on Twitter at AMMoore67. And Andy says, To the Unknown is Wayne Hussey's finest work. I'm not sure he's on the same wavelength as us. I think he's talking about The Mission there, isn't he? The old 80s goth band. But thanks anyway, Andy. Thank you. Next up, we have heard from Philip Edney, who's one of the guys from the Sirens of Audio podcast. And his Twitter handle is at EdneyPhilip. And he says, In many ways, this was the perfect episode for Verity Lambert to finish with. It's unique. It used the most famous created monster she introduced in the Daleks. It's the start of what will be an epic run. It's full of great actors, characters, sets and costumes. A lost classic. Thank you, Philip. And lastly from me, we have heard from Who Colour on Twitter at Who Colour. Now this is a gentleman called Scott Burdett, who is an absolute genius at colorising black and white footage. And he and a group of guys did a colorisation of one of the existing episodes of Dalek's Master Plan, and it is stunning. Forget everything you thought you knew about colorisation, because I've seen my fair share of old stuff that looked really sort of ropey and just it's quite cringy to watch. This looks like it was made yesterday. It's incredible. They do some really amazing work. So yeah, check out their work because they do some pretty cool stuff. He's kept it very short and sweet and just said the live reconstruction was great fun. So thank you, Scott. And Ian, who have you heard from?
Well, we're off back down the Jason Isaacs rabbit hole. We've heard from Vintage 1983. I wonder who that could be.
Hi, Andrea.
Who says, a condom in marigolds, PPE for our times. Blue Peter costume remarks aside, the odd Dr. Light episodes are a staple now for production schedules, but a Doctor-free story was a very brave choice. It makes me wonder how good a Unit series could have been, and let's face it, much as I love him, Unit probably warranted a spin-off more than K9 did. Hats off to the students who brought this to life. That's everything we've said in a succinct nutshell.
Nice, thank you, Andrea.
This is the professional there.
Deb, who have you heard from?
Yeah, Dwayne Bunny. A fascinating start to an incredible story. Unfortunately, the only chance to catch Edward D'Souza again in Doctor Who is in, you guessed it, Big Finish. How good was the recent fan-made remake of this episode? And John Hood, the remake is fantastic. To which Andrew Lewin replies, it is very impressive, I agree. And
yes.
then Anthony Carroll. Love to see it for the delegates and Viagra plants. Must have been very strange for regular viewers not to see any TARDIS crew. #grim.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you so much for all your feedback. It's great to hear what you guys think of the stories that we're covering. And if you would like to get in touch, we will be listing all the various ways over our end credits. So it just leaves us to thank Deb for coming on and being our guest. Thank you so much, Deb.
Thank you for asking me. It's been good fun.
Excellent. Where can our listeners find you if they want to check out more of what you've got going on?
Owls and Jason Isaacs and I'm on Twitter at Lufty, Luffdee.
Excellent. So until next time, where we will be joining up with the Doctor Who team again for the Mythmakers, I have been Mark.
I have been Ian.
And I'm Deb.
If you'd like to get in touch, you can email us at mailbagofrassilon@gmail.com. We're also on Twitter at @TimeEndSpacePod, and you can also find us on Facebook. If you want to leave some audio feedback, there is a link in the show notes. You can use your phone or your computer and leave up to 60 seconds of feedback, or if you're listening via the Anchor website, you can click on the message button and leave your audio. We'd love to hear from you. And thank you to Momo Tempo for providing our theme music.